Today we're looking at the mental health crisis, okay? The question is this: why has the United States become the most medicated society in human history, while simultaneously experiencing record levels of mental illness? And why does therapy seem to create more chronic patients than cured ones, okay? We've done extensive research and discovered that the therapy industrial complex isn't designed to heal, it's designed to create permanent customers through psychological dependency, disguised as treatment. Most people think therapy is about getting better. You have problems, you see a therapist, you work through issues, you get cured, and move on with your life. But that's not what this is about. This is about the systematic transformation of human problems into chronic medical conditions that generate lifetime revenue streams through managed psychological dependency. Let me tell you what the research reveals. The US behavioral health market was valued at $87.82 billion in 2024 and is projected to reach $132.46 billion by 2032. But despite spending more on mental health than any society in history, Americans are more depressed, anxious, and psychologically distressed than previous generations. This isn't therapeutic failure. This is business success. Here's what's really happening. The therapy industry discovered that curing people is bad for business. Once someone resolves their issues and develops healthy coping mechanisms, they stop needing weekly sessions, monthly medication adjustments, and annual diagnostic evaluations. But if you can convince them they have chronic psychological conditions requiring ongoing management, you create customers for life. The transformation began with the medicalization of normal human experience through the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The DSM has expanded from 106 diagnoses across 132 pages in 1952 to over 300 diagnoses across 900 plus pages today. This isn't because humans developed more mental illnesses. This is systematic pathologization of ordinary emotional responses to create billable medical categories. Think about what this means. Normal grief becomes major depressive disorder requiring antidepressants and therapy. Normal childhood behavior becomes attention deficit disorder requiring stimulants and behavioral modification. Normal social anxiety becomes social anxiety disorder requiring exposure therapy and medication management. Every human emotion and behavioral variation is being converted into a medical condition requiring professional intervention. The business model is sophisticated. Unlike other medical specialties that aim for cure and discharge, mental health professionals are incentivized to maintain long-term therapeutic relationships. Insurance reimbursement favors ongoing treatment over resolution. Professional training emphasizes chronic care management over problem solving. The entire system profits from keeping people in therapy, not getting them out of it. But this isn't accidental therapeutic incompetence. This is deliberate dependency creation using techniques borrowed from addiction medicine. Variable ratio reinforcement through irregular breakthrough insights. Intermittent validation that keeps clients hoping for eventual resolution. Transfer of emotional dependency from problematic relationships to the therapeutic relationship itself. The research shows that most therapeutic benefit occurs within the first few sessions, but average treatment duration has steadily increased over decades. People aren't staying in therapy longer because they need more help. They're staying longer because therapists have learned to create psychological dependency that feels like therapeutic necessity. Consider how therapy actually works in practice. Instead of teaching people practical problem-solving skills they can use independently, therapy often focuses on exploring feelings, processing trauma, and understanding psychological patterns. This creates ongoing work that never really ends because emotional exploration and self-understanding are infinite processes. But here's the crucial point. Many therapeutic approaches actively discourage independent problem-solving in favor of professional dependency. Clients are taught to bring every emotional difficulty to therapy rather than developing autonomous coping strategies. They're encouraged to see complex psychological frameworks for interpreting experience rather than simple practical solutions. The therapeutic relationship becomes a substitute for normal social support rather than training for better relationships. People spend years talking about their relationship problems with therapists instead of learning communication skills they could apply directly. They develop elaborate psychological explanations for behavioral patterns instead of just changing the behaviors. This is why therapy often creates more psychologically sophisticated, but not more functionally capable people. Clients learn therapeutic vocabulary and concepts, but remain dependent on professional interpretation of their experience. They understand their psychology, but can't manage their emotions independently. The pharmaceutical integration amplified these dynamics exponentially. When therapy was combined with psychiatric medication, Treatment duration extended indefinitely because discontinuing medication became psychologically threatening for both client and therapist. The medication creates physical dependency while therapy creates emotional dependency, ensuring permanent customer retention. The chemical imbalance theory provided perfect cover for this system, even though no scientific evidence supports the idea that mental illness results from neurotransmitter deficiencies. But the theory justified both ongoing medication and ongoing therapy by suggesting that mental health requires constant professional management, like diabetes or hypertension. This medical model obscures the reality that most psychological distress results from life circumstances, relationship problems, and practical challenges that could be addressed directly. Instead of helping people change their situations or develop practical skills, therapy often focuses on changing how they feel about unchangeable circumstances or understanding why they feel bad about reasonable problems. The trauma industry represents the ultimate expression of this business model. Trauma therapy suggests that past adverse experiences create permanent psychological damage, requiring specialized long-term treatment. This framework transforms normal human resilience into pathology, while creating treatment needs that can last decades. But research on post-traumatic stress shows that most people recover from traumatic experiences without professional intervention, and that excessive focus on trauma processing can actually prevent natural recovery mechanisms. Yet trauma therapy has become a dominant therapeutic approach because it guarantees long-term treatment relationships. The therapy addiction itself becomes a recognized phenomenon. People develop psychological dependency on therapeutic relationships that prevents them from developing normal social connections. They become chronically introspective and emotionally dependent in ways that interfere with practical living. The therapy relationship crowds out family relationships, friendships, and community connections. This creates what researchers call iatrogenic illness, harm caused by the treatment itself. Therapy designed to help with relationship problems creates people who can only discuss emotions with professionals. Treatment intended to reduce anxiety creates hypervigilance about psychological symptoms. Interventions meant to build self-esteem create narcissistic preoccupation with personal psychology. But the industry protects itself from criticism by pathologizing resistance to therapy. If someone questions the effectiveness of ongoing treatment, they're exhibiting denial or resistance that requires more therapy. If they want to discontinue medication, they're having medication compliance issues requiring therapeutic intervention. Criticism of the therapy relationship becomes evidence of attachment issues needing professional attention. The training of mental health professionals reinforces these patterns. Therapists learn theoretical frameworks that interpret every human problem through medical models requiring professional intervention. They're taught to see psychological complexity rather than practical solutions. They're encouraged to maintain professional boundaries that prevent genuine human connection while fostering therapeutic dependency. Professional incentives align with chronic treatment models. Therapists who cure people quickly lose income. Those who maintain long-term therapeutic relationships build stable practices. Insurance reimbursement favors ongoing treatment over cure. Professional ethics discourage practical advice in favor of process-oriented exploration. The result is a system where therapeutic success is measured by retention rather than resolution, engagement rather than independence, insight rather than practical capability. Therapists genuinely believe they're helping people, while systematically undermining their capacity for autonomous emotional management. The cultural effects extend beyond individual therapy relationships. Society has become psychologically dependent on professional interpretation of human experience. Normal emotional responses are seen as symptoms requiring diagnosis. Ordinary life challenges are viewed as pathology requiring treatment. Natural human variability is categorized as disorders requiring management. This medical colonization of human psychology undermines traditional sources of emotional support and practical wisdom. Families defer to professional expertise rather than providing direct guidance. Communities send troubled individuals to specialists rather than offering social support. Religious and philosophical frameworks are replaced by therapeutic interpretations. The educational system has been infiltrated by therapeutic ideology that treats normal childhood development as requiring professional monitoring and intervention. Schools employ mental health professionals to manage behavior that used to be handled through normal disciplinary and social structures. Children learn to interpret their emotions through medical categories rather than developing natural emotional regulation. The workplace has become therapeutically managed through employee assistance programs, mental health days, and stress management interventions that medicalize normal work challenges while avoiding addressing actual workplace problems like poor management, unrealistic demands, or exploitative employment conditions. Even entertainment and media promote therapeutic interpretations of human experience. Popular psychology books, mental health influencers, and wellness culture spread therapeutic concepts that encourage people to see themselves as psychologically fragmented beings, requiring professional restoration. This therapeutic colonization generates enormous profits while systematically weakening human capacity for independent emotional management, practical problem solving, and social connection. The therapy industrial complex has successfully convinced people that normal human problems require expensive professional solutions rather than common sense, practical action, or community support. The most insidious aspect is how this system disguises dependency creation as empowerment. Clients are told they're taking responsibility for their mental health by entering therapy, but they're actually surrendering responsibility to professional management systems. They're encouraged to understand their psychology while being discouraged from simply managing their behavior. The research shows that people who receive brief practical intervention or no professional treatment often have better long-term outcomes than those who enter chronic therapeutic relationships. But this evidence is suppressed or reinterpreted through frameworks that protect the therapy industry's business model. Think about the economic incentives. A therapist who helps someone resolve their problems in 6 sessions makes $1,200. A therapist who maintains that client in weekly therapy for 3 years makes $18,000. Which approach do you think gets reinforced by professional training, insurance structures, and business sustainability? The therapy industrial complex has created a society of psychologically sophisticated but emotionally dependent individuals who can analyze their feelings but can't regulate their emotions, understand their patterns but can't change their behaviors, explore their relationships but can't sustain healthy connections. This isn't therapeutic failure, this is systematic emotional exploitation disguised as mental health care. The therapy industry profits from keeping people broken, dependent, and convinced they need professional help for problems humans have solved independently for thousands of years. But perhaps most damaging is how this system has convinced an entire generation that they're psychologically defective rather than responding normally to genuinely abnormal social and economic conditions. Instead of recognizing that widespread anxiety, depression, and emotional distress might indicate systemic social problems requiring collective solutions, therapy culture individualizes social pathology as personal mental illness. People struggling with economic insecurity, social isolation, meaningless work, and fractured communities are told they have anxiety disorders, depression, and trauma rather than recognizing they're responding rationally to irrational social conditions. The therapy industry profits by treating symptoms of social dysfunction as individual pathology while ignoring the social causes that create the distress. Consider what happens when someone loses their job, can't afford healthcare, faces housing insecurity, and feels hopeless about the future. Traditional therapeutic approach focuses on cognitive restructuring, emotional regulation, and stress management rather than practical assistance, economic support, or social change. The person learns to cope with intolerable conditions rather than working to change them. This therapeutic diversion of social problems into individual pathology serves powerful economic and political interests. Instead of questioning economic systems that create widespread psychological distress, people focus on managing their emotional responses to those systems. Instead of organizing for social change, they invest in personal therapeutic transformation. The therapy industrial complex has successfully convinced people that their problems are internal and personal rather than external and social. That their distress indicates psychological dysfunction rather than reasonable response to dysfunctional systems. That they need professional healing rather than practical change, political action, or community support. The ultimate irony is that the therapy industry creates the very dependency and psychological dysfunction it claims to treat. By teaching people to see themselves as psychologically fragile beings requiring professional management, it undermines the natural resilience, practical capability, or social connection that actually support mental health. The end result is a population of emotionally dependent, psychologically sophisticated, but practically incompetent individuals who can analyze their feelings but can't solve their problems, understand their trauma but can't move beyond it, explore their relationships but can't sustain healthy ones. They've been taught to manage symptoms rather than address causes, to process emotions rather than change behaviors, to seek understanding rather than practical solutions. The therapy industrial complex has succeeded in convincing people that human problems require expensive professional solutions rather than simple practical action, community support, or personal responsibility. It has medicalized normal human experience, pathologized natural emotional responses, and monetized psychological distress while systematically undermining the social connections and practical capabilities that actually create psychological well-being. And this system will continue expanding because emotional dependency is renewable while actual healing is finite. Once you solve a problem, you stop needing help with it. But you can be kept emotionally dependent on professional support indefinitely, okay? Through frameworks that define mental health as requiring ongoing expert management rather than independent emotional capability. Does that make sense, guys?